of Bulls Run Arboretum, Nature Sanctuary Arboretum, I want to welcome everyone, and especially our special guest. Last year, we were awarded a grant to install a rain garden at the Arboretum. And part of the agreement, part of the stipulations were that we have educational programs involved with it. And so we had one to kick it off, and now we're having one to wrap it up as well. So if you visit the Arboretum at 3909 Rosedale Road in Middletown, it's on the north side of the shelter. There is some very nice signage there explaining it, but Lynn's going to tell us more. So I'll mute myself and let you take it over. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm going to get it to mirror my computer screen so you can see the presentation. So get it to work for me again.
You can also do speaker view so that her screen will be larger. Okay.
All right. So hopefully everyone can see it. But yeah, my name's Lynn White, and I'm the Education and Volunteer Specialist for Butler Soil and Water Conservation District. And Melissa, who was just on there, who's not got video, she's with the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District, and she's the one that helped to provide the workshop at the beginning of the project. And we work together a lot in different things, so it's kind of nice to see her on there. I also represent the Butler County Stormwater District, and they're kind of the reason why I started getting into rain gardens in the first place. And so I've got an opening question for everyone. And, oh, it doesn't want to move on to the next slide. There we go. The opening question is, why are you interested in a rain garden? Now, in that chat box on the side of Zoom, there is a link to this question. If anyone is willing and able to do it, we'll look at the results later on. But I'm just interested in why people want to know more about rain gardens, whether it's water quality, water quantity, wildlife, because they think it looks good, or for some other random reason, like, hey, you were doing nothing at 6 p.m. tonight, so I'll click other. So if you're willing, the link to that is in the comment box along the side. But for me, my main reason is all to do with stormwater runoff. You can see here when it's raining really heavy on the road and all that water is tearing down that storm drain at the edge of the road. That water, it doesn't go somewhere to get cleaned. It goes straight into a pipe and it gets directed to the nearest stream or pond or river. And we know, like in the Middletown area, there's some creeks that have got some major issues like Diggs Creek. So we want to try and reduce the amount of stormwater runoff that's going into those areas. Not so much for in Diggs Creek, because we don't really want to go in the water there. It's kind of harmful to our health. But you do get a lot of people going out and playing in creeks, whether it's going out with their kids or going out for like education programs like I offer usually in the summertime, unfortunately not this year. Or they might be going out there for a hike with their dog or out recreating like fishing or kayaking or something. And all of this water from our neighborhoods is going down those drains and going into those waterways where people are having fun. And it causes problems because it carries a lot of pollution with it. So it causes problems with water quality. And in Middletown area, I work with Jeff Michelle with the Keep Middletown Beautiful group. Is one of the site coordinators for a huge river cleanup we do in the fall every year. Melissa's actually one as well. She goes slightly north of Middletown on the Great Miami River. But we find an amazing amount of trash, and it's not all dropped right at the river. A lot of it is stuff that was dropped in people's neighborhoods, and it's been washed down those drains. And so it ends up in our rivers, and we end up with disgusting images like that, which are really harmful to wildlife. The other big thing to do with stormwater is the water quantity. We have so much water that can go towards our rivers and streams that it begins to cause flooding issues sometimes. When we have so many built surfaces, so many roads and driveways and roofs and parking lots, there's nowhere for that water to soak into the ground. And when it runs across the surface, we can end up with more extreme flooding events. And that never used to be the case. Now, I know these pictures are from Hamilton, but hey, my office is in Hamilton. So this is back in like the 1790s. This is Fort Hamilton. And you can see there's a lot of forested land around. And as time goes on, we end up with more development, more buildings. Luckily, the roads there are still kind of dirt-packed roads. And then more and more and more buildings till you get to today where it's just endless seas of blacktop. There's nowhere for that water to soak into the ground. It's just running straight across the surface to those storm drains. And the change is huge. When you go from natural areas, only 10% of that water is running across the surface. And about 50% of it is going to soak into the ground. Some of it's going to soak in just shallow to where the plant roots are, and some of it's going to soak in deep down into the groundwater, which is really important for us in this area because that groundwater is where we all get our drinking water from. But when you end up building up the environments, like we've got this city on the right, instead of only being 10% runoff, because of all those hard surfaces, you end up with 55% runoff. And it's that water that's carrying that pollution, it's that water that's causing flooding issues. So hopefully when we put in things like rain gardens, it can help kind of lessen that impact. Let's see if this actually works. We'll see if anyone managed to. It worked when I did it this afternoon, so it better work today. We'll see what if anyone actually responded. Oh, a grand total of no one. Come on, people. Oh, well.
Couldn't find it. I answered it in the chat box.
Okay. Well, I'll go back. I'll look at the chat box later on at the end so we can like kind of discuss a little bit more. Chat box is definitely easier though. All right. So what can we do? We can go out and do anything and everything to reduce runoff. You can see the runoff in that person's yard and how their yard's flooding. That's hardly an issue compared to some of the calls we go on. But you can see that picture in the bottom right. If that's your yard, you'd be terrified. In fact, you wouldn't be living there anymore. The people that used to live there are no longer there. This is an area where there was development upstream. So they went from kind of a forested area to houses and driveways and roads. And all of that extra runoff going into the creek caused problems downstream. Extra water and that extra water shooting there through there faster, it caused mass amounts of erosion. And this house had to actually be condemned. And this has happened in several places around the county. I'm not really aware of it much in Middletown, but I know in Oxford and Fairfield, it's definitely been issues. And we've seen some problems in Westchester we're kind of keeping our eyes on. So if we can reduce runoff, then it's going to make a huge impact for people. If we can create rain gardens that are going to hold back the water, it's also going to reduce the amount of pollution going in there. And there's two thoughts on pollution. There's pollution you get from factories, which we call point source pollution. If you think about it, it's coming out of a pipe and you can point to the source. Point source pollution is also the pollution that would be coming out of a sewage treatment plant because they're cleaning the water, but it's not like crystal clear, it's not drinking water quality. So that's another point source pollution. Non-point source pollution, that's all the random things we do. That's people going out and leaving areas in their yard that are bare. And so when it rains, that sediment, that soil washes away. Though it is important to leave a few bare spots on level ground for some of our friends like the bumblebees that make their nests down underground. We also have people using too many chemicals, whether it's homeowners or farmers using too much pesticides and fertilizers, and those extras can wash in there. That's non-point source. Pet waste, that is a huge one. You might think, well, it's just one dog. Well, that one dog's going a couple of times a day, every day, and it's not the only dog in the world. Think about the number of dogs that live in Middletown or the number of dogs that live in Butler County. So it really, really adds up. We also end up with non-point sources coming from other places like cars and household chemicals and heavy metals and things like that. So non-point source pollution is where you can't really point to one place it's coming from because there's sediment coming from a bunch of places, there's pet waste coming from a bunch of places. And they've found that non-point source pollution is providing up to about 70% of the pollution in our rivers and streams these days. It used to be the factories. The factories were limited on the amount of pollution they can make. When they created the Clean Water Act, it really limited the amount of pollution from the factories. They're still allowed to make some pollution, but now it's kind of flip-flopped, and they're not the biggest problem. It's just our everyday things. Every little bit of pollution counts. So what we're going to do about it, we're going to build some rain gardens, just like the one that's at Bulls Run. So a rain garden is a planted depression. It's an area in the ground where you want the water to be able to sit and to be able to soak into the soil. And it's not a pond. A pond is going to hold water for more than a day. Rain gardens are only designed to hold water for up to 24 hours. You don't want them to hold water for any longer than that, because if they do, then it can become an area for mosquitoes to breed. It's also not a wetland or a bog garden, though I haven't really seen any bog gardens in this part of Ohio. It is a garden that is just there for temporarily holding back water, allowing it to soak in. And a rain garden can let about 30% more water soak into the ground than a grassy lawn area. In fact, a lot of people call lawns green concrete, because with us going back and forth with our lawnmowers all the time, we're kind of compacting that soil underneath, making it harder for that water to get in. And rain gardens themselves, not only are they functional gardens, they're also great for wildlife. The rain garden we built outside of our office down in Hamilton is a multifunction one. First of all, it's to stop the water from going down the drain. So there's number one. Number two, it's a pollinator garden. Number three, it's for education. We've got educational signage out. And then number four, it was just a big boring patch of grass out there. We had to do something to pretty it up. So we've got 4 different functions within that one garden. So rain gardens are functional. It's not just something that's going to take up space in your yard. So this is the diagram of the one from Bulls Run. So if there are people here that are not part of Bulls Run, this is to give you an idea. At the bottom of the screen is Rosedale Road, and that is the high point. And the big black kind of gray rectangle is the shelter. So the water runs down past that shelter towards the top of the screen where they built the rain garden. The water going down that slope was causing problems with erosion, and it was just leaving it kind of a wet, nasty mess at the entrance there to the shelter. So when they received the grant money, they were able to put in the rain garden, but also to create French drains along both long edges of that shelter to collect the water from the roof, which was also directed towards that rain garden. So when the rain garden was built, the picture on the left is, well, they went in, there's a lot of volunteers from the community and from companies like AK Steel came in and did a lot of the heavy work. And then I went out to meet Sarah, that used to be the naturalist, her father, and I dragged our intern along, and we helped mix a huge pile of compost in there to help loosen up that soil and give it plenty of pore spaces to let the water drain through. But you'll see behind the people, there's kind of an earthen wall. It's like a dam. So the water is coming down the hill from where the photographer is, which I think was actually Sarah. So it's coming down the hill past the photographer, and it will be in that area where you can see it's dark with all the compost, and it gets stopped by that earthen wall, by that dam or that berm. And that's to hold the water so it doesn't keep going down the hill into the creek and to allow it to soak in. The other picture on there is from a bunch of volunteers that went out and did the awesome planting. So I haven't had the chance to go out this spring to see how the rain garden is getting on. How are the plants doing? Has anyone got on mute to tell me how your plants are doing?
They're doing well. I haven't been over lately. I mean, it's definitely greened up. It's not brown anymore. But the plants are coming in. I don't think any of them have started blooming yet.
Yeah, we've only got 1 or 2 blooming so far in our rain garden outside the office. But I know that Sarah's father was a great help when it came to plant suggestions with all the knowledge that he has. So I'll have to get out there and look at it sometime this summer. Go out there for a hike. All right, so here's another example of a rain garden. I've got this one in here because I don't like it. The reason I don't like this is it's too close to their house. You might be able to see there's a pipe coming out near the house, but it's built way too close to the house. If you're going to encourage water to pond and soak into the soil, you don't want to do that right next to your foundation or your basement. You're going to cause yourself long-term damage. So they should have extended that further away from the house. But looks-wise, they didn't want a patch of grass and then the rain garden, I guess. Here's where they did a downspout rain garden further away. So you can see in the top left picture, it looks like a mole has been tunneling from the downspout towards the mulch bed. That's where they buried their downspout. They buried a pipe to direct that water to the rain garden. The second picture is showing that small rain garden again, but this time the photographer's back is towards the house. So it's looking out from the house to the garden. This one is from Minnesota. Both Minnesota, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Kansas City did amazing jobs with rain gardens. Kansas City actually had a 10,000 rain garden initiative about 10 years ago, and the number of rain gardens that they've got around Kansas City is just amazing. But this one was to collect some of the water coming off of the road, and also some of the water that was kind of in the ditch between the house and the road. If you do something like that, you have to make sure that it's not going to cause any problems for traffic, because especially on a bend like this is on a bend, so that people can safely see around the corner and it's not going to cause problems. And another thing is, especially if you're digging anywhere near the road, you better call OOPS, the Ohio Utility Protection Service, to make sure you're not going to be digging up any expensive phone lines or anything like that, because it's been known to happen. All right, so to design a rain garden, it can seem really, really scary at first, but there's a few things that you have to look at. First thing, look at your property. Look at how large your property is, where you would be comfortable having one of these. But remember, the second point on there is foundation. Keep it at least 10 foot from your foundation so you're not causing yourself problems. When it comes to property lines, be really careful about building it too close to the property line. Usually people's yards will drain down towards the property line, but if you get it too close and your neighbor doesn't have an understanding of what a rain garden is, they're going to be freaking out, thinking that you're just shooting all your water at them, and they're going to go nuts. Now, I have pretty understanding neighbors that I'm kind of getting into my way of thinking, and we actually discussed building a huge rain garden on the property line between both of our homes. We thought that'd be great because the amount of water that's kind of going down into this area between the two, but we decided against it because if they move or we move, the new neighbors might not be happy with it. So we thought all of that work and all of that money and that time wouldn't be worth it if we ended up with new neighbors. So yeah, keep it away from your property lines. Think about where your downspouts are. On this diagram, they've got a downspout in each corner of their house, and they've kind of colored in which areas drain to the different downspouts. It is a good idea doing it where you can capture water from the roof of your house, because there's so much water that's going to land up there. It's usually easier to capture the water from the roof of your house than it is from a driveway or something like that, because usually driveways are aiming towards the road. But think about where you can capture the most amount of water and hold it back on your property. Think about the overflow. Your rain garden's only going to hold like your normal rain amount. If we get a major soaking storm, that rain garden is not going to be able to hold all that water back. And if the overflow area is next to the door of your shed, you're going to be really unhappy with yourself. So think about where that overflow water is going to go as well. If you have large trees in your property that you really love, be really careful about putting a rain garden near their base. If you do that, you're changing the amount of water that's going to be in the soil. And some trees might love it, but some might just give up the ghost and die. So be really careful. If you're going to do one near an already existing tree, make sure it's a water-loving tree that will be able to take that amount of water that you're encouraging to go into the soil there. I already mentioned, I think on the last slide, about locating utilities and calling OOPS so that you don't actually have an OOPS. And then the last one, if you have a home with a septic system, you can't build a rain garden anywhere where that septic system is going to be spreading out water. The septic systems in this area are usually a bunch of pipes that are just beneath the surface of the soil that the water is going to slowly seep out of. And if you build a rain garden on top of that, the water is not going to be able to seep out the septic system and you're going to be backing up into your home. So those are some of the things to think about when it comes to the site that you're building on. But you really have to look at your soil. Is the soil going to let the water drain in? Your best spot is somewhere where it's going to drain at least 6 inches a day. And the best way to tell if this is going to work or not is to dig a hole. It's best to dig a hole that's a foot deep, so 12 inches deep. And some people say to dig them like a foot wide as well. I'm lazy. I usually just do it with 6 inches wide. It lets you see what's going on. You want to do this when the soil is already wet. So if it hasn't rained in a while, fill the hole with water and let it drain through. And then once that's drained and emptied, you're going to refill it and time how long it takes that water to drop. So if you check about every 4 hours or so, and then calculate how much it will be for an entire day. But the minimum drainage that you need is 6 inches per day. It's okay if your soil doesn't do that. You can amend the soil. You can fix the soil. And to fix it, you're not going to add a bunch of sand. You'll end up with what will turn into kind of concrete if you just add sand. You really need to add a lot of organic matter as well. And that organic matter, like compost, will provide a lot of pore spaces for the water to go down and through, and also for the plant roots and stuff to grow through as well. But underneath your bowl shape, so your bowl for the rain garden, remember it's a planted depression. The depression itself will be 6 to 12 inches deep. Underneath that, you need 12 inches of good soil. So yes, if your soil is not good, if you've not got 6 inches of drainage over a 24-hour period, you're going to have to amend it. And that's when rain gardens can become expensive. So if your first site you're looking for in your property doesn't really work that well, maybe check somewhere else in your yard. It might have better soil that might be more suited. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people do amend their soil to do it. I'm just cheap. It costs a lot of money to get all your sand, your compost and everything in. So, and the soil it mentions there for your 25 to 30% soil, that's not you bringing in bags of soil. That's the soil that's already there. So at least 25 to 30% of your hole is already covered. But make sure you mix it up well. Another thing that you can do with your soil is to actually have it tested. And this is not necessarily for your rain garden. It's just a good idea to test your soil occasionally to see if you're going out and tossing a whole bunch of fertilizer down there that it doesn't actually need. And Ohio State Extension is where we usually say to people to speak to about getting soils tested. I can't remember the cost. It's somewhere between $10 and $21. But they'll give you the paperwork and the directions and the envelope. And although this is Ohio State Extension, they actually send it to Michigan State because that's where the Tri-State Soils Lab is. So they're actually working together because it's not a football team. But that's where your soil will get tested if you work with Extension. We have a contractors list on our website, and I'll give you our website at the end. On our contractors list, there's also soil labs there, so you could work with one of those. Or you could go to a garden store or one of the big box stores and you can buy soil test kits there. Usually those ones don't test the amount of organics, but most soil around here has never got enough organics in it anyway, so you can just keep adding compost. I love compost. But yeah, so it's a good time to test your soil. There's a fun way to test your soil. It's a muddy way to test your soil. And it's just basically getting soil wet and manipulating it with your hands. And sand that's got, or soil that's got a lot of sand, that water is just going to shoot straight on through. If you think about building a sandcastle at the beach and pouring water, it just sinks straight through. Clay is going to be the slowest. You think about pouring water into a clay bowl, it just kind of sits there. The best kind of soil for a rain garden or for any garden is a loamy soil. A loamy soil is about equal amounts of sand and silt, and then a little bit of clay mixed in. Now, just to help you here, sand is the largest size. Clay is the smallest, and silt is kind of in between. Because people always think, oh, sand, that's the smallest size of rock. Silt and clay are smaller. So a loamy soil is a good even mix of sand and silt with a little bit of clay. And the way to do this whole manipulation thing, there's a sheet that you work through. It's a dichotomous key. And it's like, if this, then here's your answer. If no, keep working your way down. And I have a copy of this on our website, and it's on our rain garden page on our website. And again, I'll give that link at the end. But it's really easy to do. And it's fun to do with kids as well. This is one I actually do in schools sometimes with kids, and just get them completely covered in mud and wind up their teachers. So we've looked at the site overall. We've looked at the soil. Now you need to figure out how big a rain garden you actually need. So how much rainfall do we need to handle? Think about a 1-inch rainfall. Yes, we get way heavier rainfalls than that, but that's kind of like your typical rainfall. So if you plan for a 1-inch rainfall, your garden would be big enough. You can make it bigger. There's nothing stopping you from making your rain garden bigger, but we're going to calculate it for at least a 1-inch rainfall. The second thing that you need to know for your size is, where does the water flow from? And the water, so you're going to look at your drainage area. The water could come from a driveway like that. It could come off of patios like this one, or it could be coming from your rooftop. So you're going to identify that drainage area and you're going to measure it. We need to know how many square feet the drainage area is. So you're going to look at your drainage area and you're going to divide that by the percolation rate. Remember, the percolation rate was how many inches of rain were soaking into the ground in a 24-hour period. So just for kicks, we're going to say we've got a 360 square foot drainage area. I don't know if that's a huge patio, a roof of a house, or what. We're going to say we're going to try and hold back the rain from a 360 square foot area. And we've got the bare minimum of 6 inches of rainfall soaking into the soil a day. So 360 square foot area divided by our 6-inch rainfall would give us a 60 square foot garden. And when we measured our one at the front of the building, and we kind of mapped it out on the grass, it looked pathetically small. We needed a 60 square foot one, but because it was just so much grass out there right next to a monster parking lot, we ended up going bigger with our one. So it's okay to go bigger, just don't go smaller. But yep, so your size is the drainage area divided by your percolation rate will give you the square foot of your garden. When you're building your garden, and I know this is, I'm trying not to talk down on this one, but somebody was really excited to show me their garden and they'd goofed up. Make sure your inflow is higher than your outflow. Theirs wasn't. I don't know what they were thinking. I think they thought water might jump uphill, but just make sure your water is coming down into the rain garden, because water is going to take the path of least resistance. It's not going to jump uphill. So this next one is going to show you how to, like, some different shapes and stuff you can do. The top picture is a fairly flat area. So they've got water kind of coming in from all around. They've done a dotted area underneath that one, showing that 12-inch of amended or perfect soil underneath. They didn't bother drawing the dotted area under the 2 pictures underneath, but imagine it's there. So there's your typical bowl shape is the first one. The second one is what I actually put in my own yard. And that's because I have evil dogs that like to dig up mulch. And so I did a dry creek bed. So my depression has got the perfect soil underneath, but the plants are all growing in amongst pebbles and boulders. And that way my dogs can run through it and not get covered in mud. The bottom one is if you're building on a slope. Water's running downhill, so it's great to build it on a slope. If you do, you need to build a bump on the end called a berm. So a little wall, like earthen dam or a berm on the end of it. And my next slide shows more detail about slope. So the first picture for slope is a 5% grade. So the first thing they did is they marked off the area with a level piece of string. So they could measure down 6 inches. They wanted their garden to be 6 inches deep. And the dotted line there shows you the old lawn surface. So underneath the dotted line down to the pale brown, they had to dig all of that soil out. But they're lucky, they had somewhere to put it. They used it to build the berm. So the dark brown area is showing where they had to add soil. So they had somewhere they could put all of that soil for that shallow slope, because 5% is not very steep. Our next one, the 10% grade, is a lot steeper. So they did the same thing. We've got that level surface with the string, so they know the highest water level. But you can see there's not much soil they had to dig out there. But the dark brown area shows a lot of soil had to get added. So on a steeper slope, you might have to go out and get soil from somewhere else to really push down in those areas to be able to make that berm to hold it in place. And when you plant your berm, or when you build the berm, put plants on it fairly quickly. We want the plants to be able to hold onto that to stop it from being eroded. So those plant roots will help hold it in place. But yep, so you can see the difference there on how much soil they've had to move and the amount of earthwork. But slopes are generally a good place to do them. If it's a ridiculously steep slope, then you can kind of do a terraced one. And Crawford House, which is near Garfield Middle School in Hamilton, it used to be the Metro Parks office many years ago. It's an old historic house that has a steep hill going down to a creek, and they built a terraced rain garden about 10 years ago. Going down, they actually worked with a landscaping company to put in this terraced rain garden, and they were taking great care of it the first several years. But I know the volunteers that were taking care of it started to become just sick and just unable to help in the end. So I haven't checked it this year to see what condition their rain garden's in. I'm not sure if it's been overtaken by weeds or not, but I know the terracing is probably still holding up, because it was an amazing job they did with that. So yeah, you can do it on a really steep slope all the way to flat. You just need to make sure the water is going to get in there and be able to sit there and stay for up to 24 hours. All right, mulch. I know you can get all sorts of colors and all the rest of it. I'm ignoring color. Our big thing with mulch is, does it float? I've seen a few rain gardens where they've tried to use rubber mulch. Yeah, rubber mulch floats. So does bark chips. So if you put bark chips in and the water's coming in there and it's moving, it's just going to lift up all those bark chips and kind of move it towards one area. The best mulch to use is double shredded or like super fine mulch. That stuff doesn't seem to float as much. That's what we used in our garden out here, and it's what we've used in a few of the school rain gardens that we've helped with, and it seems to do the best job. So the finely shredded or double shredded hardwood mulch seems to do best. There's another reason not to use the bark chips. The bark chips really don't have much in the way of nutrients in them. And as they begin to decompose, they're pulling nitrogen out of the soil because they're all carbon. And so they're pulling some of that nitrogen out of the soil when they're beginning to break down. If you're using, like usually the wood chips have got some other plant material in there, a little bit of leaf litter and a bit of other stuff. So it's not pulling out quite so much of the nutrients and nitrogen from the soil. But yep, double shredded is a way to go, unless you want to keep going out there and raking your mulch back into place again. Or you could go with rock. Like I mentioned, I did the creek bed kind of style one in my yard, and I used rock. Unless you're using lava rocks, then they should not float. All right, erosion. After we built our one outside the office, and this is not our one, but when we built the one outside the office, we found that water was coming so fast through the grass swale that the builders had put out there that we had erosion going into our rain garden. So we put a bunch of rocks on the inlet. And this rain garden here actually has 2 inlets. And so they've put rocks on both. Keep an eye on the outlet for a rain garden if you build one. Because on those monster heavy rainstorms that are too much for your rain garden to hold back, when that water starts to move out, it might start to erode your berm. So watch to see where its path of least resistance is and add some rock to those areas as well. Or add some super duper strong plants that can help hold that soil together. All right, now the fun stuff, the plants. Always the best part of doing any kind of garden, the plants that you're going to put there and then the animals that they can attract. So when we built our one at the office, it was a project between myself and an incoming class of master gardeners. And so I taught them the basics, and they went out and they did the percolation tests and the soil tests and came up with a plant list and everything else. But we had some kind of obscure plants on there that weren't readily available. And so we were going to end up with some kind of bald areas in our planting. And it's a good idea as soon as you built this to get the plants in the ground, because this is where you're directing water to. If you don't have the plants in the ground, you could get a bunch of erosion. So it's better to have plants that are readily available. Remember, this is designed to hold water. So on this diagram where the P's and the H's are, those areas are going to be really wet. So you want your plants that love water the most to be in those areas. And because it's a bowl shape, around the edges are going to be fairly dry. So you can put some drier plants around the edges. So an example of that would be milkweed. You could put swamp milkweed in the middle, and you could do common milkweed around the edges because they both have different water tolerances. Again, going to this bowl shape, think about the height of your plants. You could put really tall plants in the middle, but because the middle of the rain garden is lower than the edges, they might not look so tall. So think about the differences in heights as you're building that garden. We ended up putting shrubs in the middle of ours. We put a red twig dogwood and not a button bush, I blanked out. His name will come up in one of the slides soon. But we put some shrubs in the middle of ours, and that gave us some height in the center, and it also gave us some seasonal interest. That red twig dogwood with the young bright red stems looks good in the wintertime. So think about the different seasons as well. You can do a sun garden or you can do a shade garden. If you do a shade garden, you're not going to have as much benefit of the sun helping to evaporate the water. So you really definitely have to make sure you've got at least 6 inches of percolation a day into the soil. But you can do shade gardens as well. And then think about the plants you're using. Are they native plants, which are going to be most beneficial for wildlife in this area? Are they non-native, which is okay. We just don't want invasive ones there. And that's why I've got my big red cross through invasive. We've got so many problems with invasive plants here in Ohio already. We really don't need to be adding those to our rain garden. So the plants that you put in there, the size of your rain garden, you could end up with a lot of plants. If we go for like kind of the average spacing of about 18 inches, then take the square foot of your garden and divide it by 2.25. So a 67 square foot garden is going to need about 30 plants. You can keep the cost down if you buy plant plugs. If you buy plant plugs, you don't get that instant satisfaction of having like this awesome looking garden as soon as you're done, but they will spread out over time. And when we built our one outside the office, we really didn't have much in the way of plants. We had some that were donated from some of the Master Gardeners' gardens, but then I got the rest as plant plugs. And we were watching for native plant sales in this area. The Allwood Audubon does a great native plant sale in the spring most years. I don't know if they did it this year or not. And we actually bought a lot of our plants from there. And I've forgotten the name of it, but in Dayton, there's a place with a bunch of nuns. I'm sorry, I didn't grow up with any religion, so I'm not really sure what you call that place with a bunch of nuns. But they have, like, it's a huge ecological order, and they do a massive plant sale, and I've heard amazing things about it. I've never managed to go and get plants from them because I'm always working the weekends that they have their sale.
It's a Bergamo Center.
Zoo in Warren County, and I'm sure Melissa can type in something about the zoo in Warren County, but they do plant sales as well. They don't do plant plugs, they'll do like the big pots, which are more expensive, but their plants are amazing. So there's lots of places you can get, like you can get native plants if that's the route you're going to go. Here's some examples of plants that might be interesting for a garden. Now we had turtlehead. I don't know if it was rose turtlehead, but I don't know if somebody weeded that one out of our rain garden or what happened to it. But a few of our plants disappeared when somebody weeded one day because she didn't realize it was native plants that were not weeds. But yeah, so turtlehead was a fun one that was in there. We also had monkey flower, which I'd never even heard of before. That was kind of a sweet one to have down in the bottom where it's wet. The red plant there is cardinal flower, which is a cousin to the blue lobelia that's on the next row. I already mentioned doing the swamp milkweed in the bottom of the rain garden and possibly doing the common milkweed around the edges. but there's so many different herbaceous plants that you can use to add color. And then you can add grasses to give you different textures as well. So you can really have a lot of fun picking and choosing and playing with the plants that are there. But think about the seasons that they'll bloom. Think about the heights of the plants, and also think about whether or not they like wet, dry, or if they're really tolerant, it'll take a mixture of the two. So those are just some of the non-woody ones. Here's some shrubs. And I don't know why when I put all these pictures in here, why I end up with a bunch of white flowering things. It's not just white flowering shrubs that you can put in there, but these are some of the ones that are native to the area. 9-bark does really well. It spreads out a lot. Dogwoods love rain gardens. I've got a silky dogwood in the picture there, but our one outside, we've got the red osier or the red twig dogwood. Spice bush, that's the other plant, the other shrub we have in our rain garden. I didn't add the button bush to this, and I should have done. If you haven't seen a button bush bloom, their flowers are just amazing on them. They look like little white gumballs all over them, and they really like wet areas. So there's lots and lots of variety in the plants that you can put in there. So here's some examples. This is from city of Maplewood, Minnesota. I think most of these are. So this person had a daylily focus, and they've got a whole series of daylilies around the edge of their roadside rain garden. Remember, again, if you do a roadside one, think about line of sight for traffic and for safety. Here's a shrub one. I'm not too good at spotting shrubs. I can tell that's a hydrangea, but past that, I'm not sure what else they've got in their shrub rain garden, along with those daylilies as well. This prairie one, they've done mass plantings of color, which give it a lot of interest, and I'm sure that thing is just hoaching in different pollinators. And so you think about prairie plants as being dry loving plants, but you do also get a lot of prairie plants that will sit there with their feet wet. Then this butterfly garden, we've got different kinds of coneflowers and butterfly weed, and it looks like yarrow off in the distance. So lots and lots of mixes. Here's a shade garden. As I mentioned earlier, you can plant them in the shade. So they've got hostas and astilbe and whatever else in there. Then this sunny border garden is showing that I mentioned earlier about you can put the really tall plants in the middle because, hey, they're at the bottom of the bowl, and then the shorter plants at the edge. And I have no idea what's what in that picture. I like to garden, but I don't know much about plants. Debbie, you probably know these. All right, I'm hoping this plays. If not, nope, it didn't. I'll show you this at the end. I'll show you that. It's a short video. I'll show you at the end because I've pulled it up separate on the computer. When you create a rain garden, you're going to have to maintain it. You don't want to go in there and add a ton of chemicals because remember, this water is going to be soaking the groundwater where we get our drinking water from. So you don't want to go in there with a bunch of herbicides and fertilizer and stuff like that. Limit the amount of compaction. If you're going in there and weeding, make sure you're not stomping all over the place. I've got a few rocks and stuff in the rain garden I can stand on to reach most parts of our rain garden out there, so I'm not compacting the entire thing walking around. And just like any garden you put in, that first year or two of life of the plants, you're going to have to nurture them. You're going to have to make sure they've got plenty of water, especially if it ends up being a dry summer. So it's not a lot of work, but weeding is the main one. And anyone that's been to our office down here will see that our rain garden just now, I've been out twice already this year weeding it, but because it's been so wet this spring, they just keep popping up and popping up. So I guess I know what I'm doing tomorrow, going out there to weed once again. Oops, come on. There we go. I've got a few other quick things to finish with for things that you can do to help keep our water clean and prevent the non-point source pollution. And one of them is rain barrels. It's a really great way to collect water for watering your garden because it doesn't have the fluorides and other chemicals added to it like they do with our city water. And I don't wash windows or cars. I leave that one up to my husband because all I do is leave a streaky mess. But because it doesn't have all those dissolved minerals in it, it's supposed to leave a more streak-free finish. Big thing though is if you do a rain barrel, don't drink it. That water's came off of your roof where all the birds have been tap dancing and pooping all over the place. So you don't want to be drinking that water. If you're looking for a source of rain barrels, you can get them practically anywhere these days. A lot of the garden centers and big box stores have got them. They're sold all over the web. We have a bunch in our office that we sell. We sell kits so people can build their own if they have a barrel. And then Melissa and I are both part of a group called Save Local Watchers. And every spring for several years now, there's been a rain barrel painting kind of contest. And all these painted barrels are auctioned off at the end. This year, with all the health stuff going on, the auction was canceled. But there's some pictures of some of the really awesome barrels that usually get auctioned off in the spring from them. So rain barrels, great way for holding that water back and keeping it on your property. And the rain barrels can take a lot of water. If you had a roof that was 25 by 40 feet, and we've got that 1-inch rainfall I keep talking about, that's 600 gallons of water. Obviously, you're going to need a lot of barrels for that, but it's not all going to come out of one downspout. If you look at the downspouts around your house, if it's a good area to put one in, you can collect a lot of water for your different gardening needs. A few other things, make sure that you don't have a bunch of bare soil in your yard. You do, as I mentioned earlier, want tiny little areas here and there on flat ground so that the bumblebees that have their solitary nests underground have got somewhere to live. But you don't want big expanses of bare ground. And so those of you with a vegetable garden, in the fall, think about a way of keeping that covered, whether it's adding mulch to the top of it or a whole bunch of shredded leaves to the top of it, or you can plant a cover crop like farmers do. You might see that in the winter, when the corn has been harvested, there's other plants coming up, and that's a winter cover crop that the farmers put in. And they're not making money off that cover crop. It's to keep the soil in place, and it actually helps to improve that soil as well. It can add nutrients back into the soil. Then I mentioned earlier about Crawford House having their terraced landscaping to slow that water so it's not moving so fast, so it doesn't cause as much erosion. And then my last one I have on here is, instead of going out and making big concrete surfaces, like putting in a new concrete patio, think about how you could actually have a permeable surface like this where that water can soak in between the pavers. So my contact information is there. I didn't put my phone number on it because I'm working from home just now for the most part. I came into the office to make sure my internet connection didn't die out. But my email is there if you want to email me any questions. And I mentioned our website has got information about rain gardens on it and the contractors list for the soil labs. I'm going to get rid of the screen share from this, try and get rid of the screen share from this. And actually I need it back on. I'm going to share this. I need to share the video. I'll show you that short video. Where did it go? But this is the rain garden outside of the Soil and Water and Ohio State Extension office. And that was a sign that we put in there when it was first installed. But you can see all of the pollinators just swarming around, enjoying this thing. So there's like jewel pie weed and can't remember what that stuff is. Mountain mint is the one that seems to attract the most. There's a blue lobelia. But there's a big assortment of plants out there, but the mountain mint was beginning to take over, so we really thinned that out last fall. But the mountain mint doesn't spread like most regular mints. But there's a big mix of plants. So this picture is from a year after it was planted. It looks kind of different now because all the plants have filled out. We did start with the plant plugs. So stop share. All right. Oh, there we go. It looks like Melissa has got the information on the chat on the edge. That's the name of it. Boyer Farm is a Cincinnati Zoo property, and she's put links there for the farm and also a link there for Save Local Waters. Thanks, Melissa. Let me scoot up on the, and see what else is in here. All right. Oops. Oh no, the watcher, okay. So somebody tried to link and it decided not to work for all the reasons.
The one you had up first did not work. The second one I didn't write down.
Okay.
I don't know.
It's being picky with me.
So those links that you mentioned are in the chat room, so if you wanted to,
Oh, and then somebody came up with the name from the in Dayton is the Bergamot Center. Thank you, Debbie. I should know that one. I've actually stayed there overnight for a board retreat before, and I still couldn't remember it. The native plant sale. All right. So does anyone have any questions? Silence. And if you're trying to say a question, you can't, we might not be able to hear you because it's complete silence just now. So if you do want to say something out loud, remember to turn your microphone on. Or
Cool.
all right. Well, that's it for me.
Thank you.
Did she talk about all the things?
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't sit here on my own talking to myself.
Very nice.
Yeah, thank you. It was very informative.
Yeah, this summer we are having our pollinator series continue. So I don't know if anyone has been part of the pollinator series. It was my office and Ohio State Extension and the Troy and Kathy Schwabel from the Riverside Natural Area.
Mm-hmm.
But we canceled April because there was no way.
Yeah.
I may take place, and if it does not, we'll be doing this. We'll be doing it on Zoom. And we're looking at trees for pollinators and pollinator pests, and I can't remember what else. But that's on July, it's either 15th or 21st, and I've just forgotten, so I need to look up my calendar. It's on July 21st at 7 p.m. So I'll be linking, if it ends up being on Zoom, I'll put that on our website. And if it ends up actually taking place, will all depend on the governor's orders. I think Melissa is planning a rain barrel workshop
Very good.
at some point. So if Melissa's still on there, she might want to type into the chat.
Pay attention.
And if she doesn't, you might want to, oh, there we go. So June 23rd, Melissa at Warren Soil and Water is going to have a rain barrel workshop. So if you check her website, just Google Warren Soil and Water, Ohio, and you'll find them. Nope, there we go. WarrenSWC.com. Apparently she likes the letter M. But yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me on.
Yes, and thanks for taking the time to do this.
yep.
And
Thank
hopefully
you.
I'll see you all at Bulls Run sometime.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yep.
Enjoy.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.